And that, it upsets me when there are obvious things going on, seemingly obvious, that are slowing down the rate of progress, not progress altogether. It's not like we're going backwards. I'm not with the people who say certain things are causing regression. I don't think that's true. That's overhyping things. That's hyperbolic. But any simple change like reduce the income tax rate, which causes people to want to go out and earn more money, it gives them motivation to do more stuff. That's a simple change that could increase the rate of knowledge creation. So what can governments do? Governments can just, it's the standard take that people on that side of politics have. Reduce taxes and reduce regulation. That's it. There's really nothing magical about that, because taxation is nothing but taking from people who produce to give to people who don't, namely, or to put in the hands of people who don't, namely politicians. So politicians then decide what's going to happen with that money rather than the business owner who was using the money to make more money. You have to create wealth. Wealth is not a fixed pie. There's not a fixed amount of resources and a fixed amount of money. No, you create it. When you take those resources out of the ground, you rearrange them in different ways to make widgets and things, which make everyone wealthier. The cost of the material, I'm speaking to people right now on a MacBook. And the MacBook has rare earth metals and it's made of aluminium and plastic and stuff. Those materials on their own, taken out of the ground, what? I don't know. Maybe there's a tiny little bit of gold in there and palladium and tantalum and rare earth metals and so on. You add it all up, I don't know, maybe it comes to $50 American. Okay, that's up. The lithium in the battery, maybe that comes to 100. It certainly doesn't come to the some thousands that the computer is worth, right? So why? How has it gone from this raw materials that were worth some hundreds of dollars, when rearranged, become a device worth thousands? The wealth has been created. That additional cost has been created. Where? By people's knowledge, by the inventor and the creator's knowledge and the work of people, not merely putting the thing together, but primarily having the idea in the first place. The descendants of the Steve Jobs of the world, who came up with the first Apple computers, are the ones who've created that knowledge and continue to create that knowledge, which is creating the wealth once it is put into the resources to create that thing we call a piece of technology or a laptop computer. So, yes. So how can governments create more wealth? Reduce the regulations on companies that are actually doing precisely that sort of thing, that are using resources and transforming them into technology. Because the wealth is held within, it's almost like it's held within the bonds that hold together that bit of technology. The truth is, it's held within the abstract relationships between the atoms and molecules of the resources that now come to make up the computer or the smartphone or the car or the aeroplane or whatever it happens to be, whatever the bit of technology is. It's the plan written down on a piece of paper or stored in memory somewhere that is really worth something. Where did that worth come from? From people's heads. But they can't do that. They can't do that as well if they don't have enough money to do the research and have time to do the thinking and all that sort of stuff, which only comes with increased wealth. So governments have to figure out ways to increase wealth, and the way to not increase wealth is to tax people. The way to not increase wealth is to have regulations on what kind of products can be produced or under what conditions they can be produced and that kind of thing. As Yaron Brook points out, companies of the world do not want to kill their customers. You don't need to have government regulations on things like elevators. And I know some people balk at this idea, but it's not a good plan for elevator manufacturers to kill their customers. As soon as you get known as being the person who makes the elevator that falls 15 floors, okay, you're not going to be contracted to work in the next high rise. No, we want and in fact, of course, we know now that the overwhelming majority of companies, whatever industry they're engaged in, regulate themselves far more than what the government regulates. But the government likes to regulate, which means they have to employ regulators. They have to write laws about all this stuff. That all costs money. And so, yeah, the government should be there to protect rights. And to the extent that it's not there merely to protect the rights of consumers and traders and citizens, and it's getting into other areas, is slowing growth, knowledge growth, growth in the energy area, growth everywhere. If you want an existential threat, I'd say that's one for you, because we're not often making progress fast enough. Adil Zishan, could you explain what scientism is and why it is wrong? Yeah, scientism is the application of science to things that are not scientific. So if I want to know, once I finish this live stream, it's coming up to Christmas. I have to buy Christmas gifts for people. I have a few people in mind that I've got to get Christmas gifts for. If I was to say, well, I've got to do a scientific study to figure out what is the best Christmas gift to get my, nieces and nephews. That's what I need. I need to run a scientific study of some sort. Get an average of people that age. Something like that. Do an experiment. This is scientism. This is the wrong question. What I should do in the future is a matter of preferences for a particular individual, preferences for me. This is the domain of morality, not science. Science is about what is the case. And if you're very lucky with certain physical systems, you can make a prediction about what will be the case under certain conditions. But it can never tell you what should be the case. And yes, of course, you have people who say, well, if you can measure the well-being of people, then you can maximize well-being in the future. The problem here is, what counts as being good for well-being right now? How do I know that getting a Mac rather than a PC produces more well-being? And if I scan the brains of people who already have PCs and Macs, does that tell you what I should get? What is the more moral purchase to make? Morality is about the domain of shoulds. Science is about the domain of ises. Scientism is attempting to bridge the gap, often for authoritarian reasons. When I say that, I mean it's the expert scientists trying to do something other than science, trying to say, hey, I'm an expert scientist. I have a PhD in science. And so therefore, politician, you need to listen to me. Do you want to refuse to listen to expert opinion? Of course they don't. This is science. This is the problem with scientism. It's a form of authoritarianism, often masquerading as scientific rationality. It is quite possible that certain scientists have, what do you call it, small man syndrome. It's like I'm not being listened to enough. I've told you, damn it, climate change is coming and it's going to kill us all. So they start writing articles and saying what should be done. It is more than reasonable and valid for climate change scientists to tell us what the state of the climate is, to tell us what their models are, and to tell us what their models are going to predict. They can suggest what the solution should be as well. And it's incumbent upon the rest of us to say, well, models always have elasticity. Models are only as good as the laws that you're using to govern the system, the laws you think exist that govern your system, the conditions you think you've been able to measure to produce the prediction, always exceedingly difficult, and for reasons we won't go into right now, perhaps impossible. So it's incumbent upon the rest of us to say, yeah, look, we respect what you're saying as an expert, as a scientist. We respect the idea that you've got this scientific model, but we also know that models are very much open to error. And you only need to have small errors. Some of these things are very susceptible to small changes for the prediction to be way off. That's one thing. And the other thing is, your job is to tell us what is the case and to tell us what you predict is going to be the case. It shouldn't be also to command us about what we should do, especially when it comes to economic policy and energy policy and any other kind of policy. That's the job of the politician. Politicians are very weak at the moment, quite around the world. And by weak, I mean because they defer, they outsource their decision-making to the expert. This has happened especially during COVID, but everywhere else. And they shouldn't. They shouldn't, because one consideration is science, one consideration. Another is